Good evening, and welcome to another bedtime story. This is your moment to unwind, a time just for you to slow down, breathe deeply, and let your body and mind gently relax. Lie down in a comfortable position. Close your eyes. Breathe in deeply through your nose and slowly exhale through your mouth. Once more, inhale and exhale. Let each breath quiet your thoughts, like leaves drifting across a calm, peaceful lake. Now, imagine yourself in an enchanted forest. The wind whispers through ancient trees, and the moonlight gently covers the ground in a soft silver glow. In this magical place lives a legendary hero known for his bravery and generous heart, Robin Hood. Tonight, we'll dive into his story, a journey filled with justice, friendship, and courage, told in a calm and soothing rhythm, so you can relax and drift off to sleep as if you were there beneath the stars of Sherwood. Many hundreds of years ago, during the reign of the Plantagenets, England was so thickly blanketed in forests that it was said a squirrel could leap from tree to tree all the way from the River Severn to the Humber. The landscape must have looked vastly different from what we know today, yet roads still crisscrossed the country from north to south and east to west, serving those who dared to venture beyond their homes. At certain times of the year, these roads teemed with travelers, pilgrims on their way to sacred shrines, merchants carrying their precious wares to court, rotund abbots and bishops perched atop mules nearly as stout as they were, bound for royal councils, and more often still, solitary knights in search of adventure. Beyond the main roads, countless narrow tracks and green footpaths meandered through the countryside, leading to humble clusters of cottages where peasants, charcoal burners, and farmhands lived. Occasionally, a broader clearing would signal the presence of a small yeoman's holding. Wandering through the woods, one might come upon a grand abbey, catching glimpses of monks in long black or white robes fishing in the region's many streams and rivers, or casting nets into the monasteries' fish ponds. Elsewhere, one might spy a castle with its round towers and high battlements, guarded by towering walls and a deep water-filled moat. It was in such an England that the legendary Robin Hood was born. Little is known of his origins, who he was, where he lived, or what grievous deed had placed him beyond the king's mercy. For Robin Hood was an outlaw, and any man could kill him without fear of punishment. Yet outlaw or not, the poor loved him and saw him as their champion. Many brave, bold men joined his band, living a merry life beneath the greenwood canopy, with moss and fern for bedding, and the king's deer for supper, though hunting them was a crime punishable by death. Peasants of all kinds, farmers, yeomen, and even, as some say, knights could pass freely, for Robin Hood took no toll from them. But wealthy churchmen with jingling purses and proud bishops surrounded by richly dressed attendants quaked with fear when nearing Sherwood Forest. Who could say whether Robin Hood or one of his men wasn't lurking behind each tree? The arrival of little John and Day, Robin was walking alone in the forest when he came to a river crossed by a narrow bridge, just wide enough for one man at a time. Standing in the middle of it was a stranger. Robin called for him to step aside. "I am no man's servant," came the reply. Angered, Robin drew his bow and nocked an arrow. "Would you shoot a man armed with nothing but a staff?" The stranger asked with scorn. Ashamed, Robin lowered his bow and drew a stout staff he carried. "Then we'll fight until one of us ends up in the water," he said. And so they did, trading blows until the stranger landed a strike so square that Robin went tumbling into the stream. "You're a brave soul," Robin said, wading to shore. Then he blew his horn, and 50 of his men, all dressed in green, came running to the narrow bridge. "Did you fall in for fun?" one of them asked. "No," Robin replied. "This stranger bested me in fair fight and sent me into the stream." At that, the forest men seized the stranger and would have thrown him in had Robin not stopped them. Instead, he invited the newcomer to join their band. "Here's my hand," the stranger replied, "and my heart with it. My name, if you'd know it, is John Little." "That won't do," cried Will Scarlet. "We shall feast, and from this day forward, because he stands 7 feet tall and has a waist as round as an L, he'll be called Little John." And so it was at the feast, Little John, who liked to know exactly what he was signing up for, asked Robin Hood a few questions. "Before I join you, tell me, what sort of life is this? How will I know whom to rob and whom to spare? Who should I strike, and who should I leave be?" Robin replied, "Take care never to harm a farmer or a yeoman of the greenwood, nor any knight or squire, unless you've heard ill of him. But if a bishop or archbishop crosses your path, be sure to relieve him of his wealth. And above all, never forget the High Sheriff of Nottingham." With that, Robin Hood named Little John second in command of the Woodland Brotherhood. And the new outlaw never once forgot the Sheriff of Nottingham, who was the forest men's most bitter foe. Little John's first adventure, Robin Hood, had no love for idleness among his men. So once he sent Little John and Will Scarlet to Watling Street, a well-traveled road, with orders to hide among the trees and wait for adventure. Should they encounter a count, a baron, an abbot, or a knight, they were to bring him unharmed to Robin. But along Watling Street, the road lay silent, white, and sun-baked, with no dust cloud to signal an approaching entourage. The land to the east and west lay still. At last, where a side path met the main road, a lone knight appeared. No sadder man had ever ridden on a summer day. Only one foot rested in a stirrup, the other hung limp. His head drooped, his reins were slack, and his horse ambled on unbothered. Before such a sorrowful sight, the hearts of the outlaws were filled with compassion. Little John knelt down and welcomed the knight on behalf of his master. "And who might your master be?" asked the knight. "Robin Hood," replied Little John. "I've heard many good things about him." The knight said, "And I will gladly go with you." So they all set off together. Though tears streamed down the knight's face as he rode, he said nothing, and nothing was said to him. At last they arrived before Robin Hood. "Welcome, Sir Knight." Robin called out, "Thrice welcome, in fact, for I've waited to break my fast until either you or some other guest arrived. God save you, good Robin." The knight replied. After washing in the stream, they sat down to dine bread and wine, venison from the king's forest, swans and pheasants. "I haven't had a meal like this in over 3 weeks," the knight said. and if ever I pass this way again, good Robin, I will offer you a feast as grand as this one you've given me." "Thank you," said Robin. "My table is always open, but I'm not so greedy that I can't wait for a return. Still, before you leave, I must ask you to pay for the meal you've had. It's never been a custom," said the knight, "for a yeoman to charge a knight. And truth be told, I've only 10 shillings in my purse." "Go, Little John," said Robin, "and see what he truly has. And Sir Knight, if you speak the truth, and that's all you have, I won't take a penny from you. In fact, I'll give you what you need." So Little John spread out the knight's cloak and opened his purse. Inside were only 10 shillings and nothing more. "What news, Little John?" Robin asked. "Sir, the knight told the truth," replied Little John. "Then pour him a cup of our finest wine," said Robin. "And tell me, Sir Knight, was it your own misdeeds that brought you to this state? For 100 years my family lived in the forest," said the knight, "and we once had the wealth to spend, 400 pounds a year. But in the last 2 years, misfortune fell upon me, my wife, and my children as well." "What misfortune was that?" Robin asked. "My own foolishness," the knight said, "and my deep love for my son. He never listened to my advice, and before he turned 20, he killed a knight of Lancaster and a squire. To make amends, I had to pay a heavy price. I couldn't raise the sum without mortgaging my land to the wealthy abbot of St. Mary's. If I don't repay him by a certain date, I'll lose my lands forever. And what is the sum you owe?" asked Robin. "Speak truthfully, 400 pounds, said the knight. "And if you lose your land, what will you do then?" Robin pressed. "I'll flee across the sea," said the knight. "I'll bid farewell to my friends and to England. There's no better path for me." At that, tears welled up in his eyes, and he turned to go. "Good day, my friend," he said. "I cannot repay you what I owe." But Robin held him firmly. "Where are your friends now?" he asked. "Sir, since I've grown poor, they've all abandoned me. If we meet on the road, they turn their faces away. Yet when I was wealthy, they never left my castle." When Little John, Scarlet, and the others heard this, they wept with shame and anger. Robin ordered a goblet of the best wine to be poured and handed to the knight. "Have you no one who could stand as surety for you?" Robin asked. "No one," said the knight, "except Our Lady, who has never failed me." "You speak well," said Robin. "Little John, go to my treasury chest and bring me 400 pounds and count it properly." So Little John and Will Scarlet went and returned with the money. "Master," said Little John, as Robin counted the gold and saw the amount was exact, "look at this man's clothes, they're worn thin. You've stores of green and scarlet garments in your chest. No merchant in England has better. I'll measure out some with my bow." And so he did. "Master," Little John continued, "there's still more to be done. You must give him a horse, so he can ride to the abbey in a manner fitting his station." "Take the gray horse," said Robin, "and saddle him with new tack. And give him a sturdy pack mule and a fine pair of boots with golden spurs. And since it would be a shame for a knight to ride alone on such a mission, I'll lend you Little John as a squire. He'll serve you well. When shall we meet again?" Ask the knight. 1 year from today, said Robin, beneath the tree in the heart of the greenwood. And so the knight rode away, Little John trailing behind. As he rode, he thought of Robin Hood and his men and blessed them for their kindness. Tomorrow, he said to Little John, I must be at the Abbey of St. Mary, in the city of York. If I'm even a day late, I'll lose my lands for good. But even if I arrive with the money, I fear they'll deny me the right to redeem them. Now, the abbot had also been keeping close watch on the calendar. The next morning, he said to his monks, 1 year ago today, a knight borrowed for £100 from me, giving his lands as security. If he fails to pay me by midnight tonight, they will be ours forever. It's still early, said the prior. He may yet come. He's far across the sea, said the abbot, starving and cold. How could he possibly return? It would be shameful, said the prior, to seize his lands. You wrong him deeply by setting such harsh terms. He's dead or hanged, said a fat-headed monk, the cellarer, and we'll have his £400 to spend on our gardens and our wines. Then he and the abbot set off for the courthouse, where the knight's lands were to be officially declared lost by the high judge if he doesn't show today. The abbot said gleefully, rubbing his hands, if he doesn't come today, everything will be ours. He won't come, said the judge, but he did not know that the knight was already at the gate, and Little John was with him. Welcome, Sir Knight, said the porter. The horse you ride is the finest I've ever seen. Let me take them both to the stable, so they may eat and rest. They will not pass through these gates, the knight said sternly. And he walked alone into the great hall, where the monks sat at table. Kneeling, he bowed before them. I have returned. My lord, said the knight to the abbot, who had just come back from the court. I've come today as I promised. Did you bring my money? Was all the abbot said. Not a single penny, replied the knight, who wanted to see how the abbot would treat him. Then what business do you have here without it? The abbot snapped angrily. I came to beg you for more time. The knight said humbly, the day was set, and it cannot be changed. The judge interjected coldly, but the knight pleaded once more for help, asking the judge to be his friend in this time of trouble. I stand with the abbot, the judge replied simply. Good Sir Abbot, be merciful. The knight implored again. Give me just one more chance to raise the money and reclaim my land. I'll serve you day and night until I've paid back the £400, but the abbot cursed and swore a great oath. He demanded that the full amount be paid that very day, or the land would be seized. The knight rose to his full height, his voice steady. It is in times of need that a man learns who his true friends are. He stared directly at the abbot, who suddenly felt uneasy and, without knowing why, despised the knight more than ever. Out of my hall, you false knight, the abbot shouted, masking his discomfort with false bravado. But the knight stood firm and replied, You lie, abbot. I have never been false. I've proven my honor in jousts and tournaments. Offer him another £200. The judge whispered to the abbot, and claim the land for yourself, not for all the gold in England. The knight declared, Even if you offered me £1,000, I would not sell it. Neither judge, abbot, nor monk shall be my heir. Then The knight walked over to a table and emptied out a bag of gold for 100 pounds in full. "Here is your money, Sir Abbot. The same sum you lent me a year ago. Had you greeted me with kindness, I might have given you more. But now, Sir Abbot, and you men of the law, I have kept my word. I will reclaim my land no matter what you say." With that, he left the hall whistling a merry tune, leaving the abbot in stunned silence, and rode home to Verisdale, where his lady met him at the gate. "Welcome home, my lord." She cried, "Have we lost everything?" "Be of good cheer, my lady," said the knight, "and say a prayer for Robin Hood. If not for his generosity, we'd be beggars now." After that day, the knight remained home, tending his land and saving every coin until he had gathered the 400 pounds to repay Robin Hood. He also purchased 100 bows and 100 arrows, each arrow a full ell long, tipped with silver and fletched with peacock feathers. Dressed in white and red, with a retinue of 100 men, he set off for Sherwood Forest. On the way, he passed a clearing by a bridge where a wrestling match was taking place. The knight paused to watch, as he himself had once been a champion wrestler. The prizes were enough to tempt any man: a fine saddled horse, a great white bull, a pair of gloves, a gleaming red gold ring, and a barrel of wine. Every local farmer dreamed of winning one, but when the match ended, the victor, a quiet man who stood apart, was attacked by the crowd, jealous of his strength and skill. They would have beaten him to death had the knight not stepped in, remembering Robin Hood and feeling pity. His men fought off the angry crowd and protected the rightful winner. When the brawl was over, the knight continued on his way and soon arrived beneath the greenwood tree, where Robin Hood and his merry men were waiting, just as they had agreed. 1 year before, God save Robin Hood and all his company. The knight called out, "Welcome, noble knight," said Robin. "Have you regained your land?" "Indeed, I have," the knight replied. "Thanks be to God and to you." "Here are the 400 pounds you lent me," said the knight, "and 20 marks more for your kindness." But Robin refused the payment. A miracle, he said, had already repaid the debt. Our Lady had seen to that, and it would be wrong to take the money twice. Then he noticed the bows and arrows the knight had brought and asked about them. "A humble gift for you," the knight replied. Not to be outdone, Robin sent Little John to his treasury once more, and had him return with 400 pounds, which he gave freely to the knight. They said their goodbyes with warmth and cheer, and Robin told the knight that if ever he needed help again, he would find it beneath the greenwood tree, as long as there was gold to be found in Sherwood. How Little John entered the sheriff's service. Meanwhile, the High Sheriff of Nottingham had declared a grand archery tournament to be held in a wide open field. Little John, ever confident in his skill, decided to take part. He rode through the forest cheerfully, whistling as he went, for he knew that none of Robin's men could match his aim, and he feared no rival. The gathering, a great crowd had assembled, and the sheriff himself was in attendance. The rules were read aloud: where the archers should stand, the distance to the target, and that each man would have 3 chances. Some archers came close to the target, a few even struck it, but only Little John split the slender willow wand. With every arrow he fired, The sheriff swore a mighty oath, declaring Little John the finest archer he had ever seen. He asked his name and where he was from, and swore that if such a man entered his service, he would pay him 20 marks a year for his skill. How Little John joined the sheriff Little John, unwilling to reveal his true identity as one of Robin Hood's outlaws, introduced himself as Reynold Greenleaf, claiming to be in service to a knight. He explained that he would need his master's permission before entering into service with another. The knight readily granted this, and Little John pledged himself to the sheriff for a term of 12 months, receiving a fine white horse to ride. Whenever he ventured out, despite this arrangement, Little John harbored no fondness for the sheriff, who was despised by the outlaws. He resolved to play as many tricks on him as possible. His opportunity came on a Wednesday, the sheriff's customary hunting day. Little John remained in bed until noon, then rose, feeling hungry, and requested dinner from the steward. The steward curtly informed him that no food would be served until the sheriff's return. Grumbling, Little John sought out the butler, who was equally unhelpful, locking the pantry door and telling him to wait. Unaccustomed to such treatment, Little John responded by forcefully kicking down the pantry door and helping himself to food and drink. After satisfying his hunger, he proceeded to the kitchen, where he encountered the sheriff's cook, a bold and stout man who had no intention of allowing anyone to commandeer his domain. The cook struck Little John 3 times, blows that were promptly returned with vigor. "You're a brave and sturdy man," Little John remarked. "A fine fighter indeed. I have a sword. Fetch another, and let's see who's the better man." The cook accepted the challenge, and they dueled for 2 hours without either gaining the upper hand. "Friend," said Little John at last, "you're one of the best swordsmen I've ever faced. If you're equally skilled with the bow, I'd take you to the greenwood, where Robin Hood would gladly pay you 20 marks a year and provide 2 suits of clothing." "Sheath your sword," replied the cook. "I'll go with you. But first, let's enjoy a meal in my kitchen and take some of the sheriff's treasure." They feasted heartily, then broke into the sheriff's treasury, seizing over 300 pounds in silver. Unseen, they departed for the forest to join Robin Hood. "Welcome, welcome," exclaimed Robin upon seeing them, "and welcome to the fine fellow you've brought. What news from Nottingham, Little John?" "The proud sheriff sends his greetings, Little John," replied, along with his cook, his silverware, and 300 pounds. Robin shook his head, skeptical. "He didn't send them willingly, I'm sure, fearing he might be ordered to return the loot." Little John slipped away to execute a new plan. He ran 5 miles to find the sheriff, who was still hunting, and fell to his knees before him, Reynold Greenleaf. The sheriff exclaimed, "What are you doing here? Where have you been?" "I was in the forest," Little John replied, "and saw a magnificent green hart and a herd of 140 deer grazing nearby. I'd love to see that," said the sheriff. "Then follow me," said Little John, leading the sheriff back to the forest. As they turned a bend, they encountered Robin Hood. "Sir, here's the master hart," said Little John. The proud sheriff stood speechless. "Alas, Reynold Greenleaf, you've betrayed me." "It's not my fault," said Little John. "Your servants refused me dinner." With that, he went to prepare supper. They dined under the greenwood tree, all famished. But when the sheriff realized he was eating from his own silverware, his appetite vanished. "Cheer up," said Robin Hood. "We won't poison you. For charity's sake, and out of respect for Little John, your life is spared. But for 12 months, you'll live with us and learn what it means to be an outlaw." To the sheriff, this was a fate worse than losing his silver and gold. He earnestly pleaded with Robin Hood to release him, swearing to become the best friend the forest men ever had. Neither Robin nor his men believed him, but he took a solemn oath never to harm them and to aid them if they were in trouble. With that, Robin let him go. How Robin met Friar Tucklife in the forest could be monotonous during winter, with days passing slowly. But in summer, when the leaves turned green and flowers and ferns blanketed the woodland, Robin Hood and his men emerged from their warm shelters, much like rabbits and squirrels, to play. They ran races, held jumping contests, or practiced archery. Anything was enjoyable when the grass was soft underfoot again. Who can kill a heart of grace from 500 paces? Robin asked his men one bright May day. They ventured into the woods to test their skills. In the end, it was Little John who brought down the hart. Much to Robin Hood's delight, "I'd ride 100 miles to find someone who could match you," he said to Little John. Well, Scarlet, perhaps a bit envious, laughed and said, "There's a friar at Fountain's Abbey who could outshoot both you and him." Robin Hood didn't take kindly to the suggestion that anyone could surpass him or his men in archery. He swore he wouldn't eat or drink until he'd met this friar, donning his mail coat and steel cap and arming himself with sword, shield, bow, and a quiver of arrows. Robin set off for Fountain's Dale. There, by the riverside, he encountered a friar, similarly armed, but without a bow. Robin dismounted and called out, "Carry me across the water, friar, or it will cost you your life." The friar said nothing, hoisted Robin onto his back, and carried him across. Upon reaching the other side, Robin leapt down, but the friar stopped him. "Not so fast, my fine fellow," he said. "Now it's your turn to carry me back, or woe will befall you." Robin complied, carrying the friar back across the river. But as they reached the middle, the friar dumped Robin into the water. "Now you can sink or swim, as you like," he said, laughing. Robin swam to shore, retrieved his bow, and shot an arrow at the friar, who deftly deflected it with his steel buckler. "Keep shooting, fine fellow," said the friar. "Shoot all day if you like. I'll not shy away." Robin continued until his arrows were spent. They then drew swords and fought fiercely until Robin, recognizing the friar's prowess, asked for a moment to blow his horn. The friar agreed, and Robin's horn blast summoned 50 of his men. The friar, in turn, whistled, calling forth 50. Fierce dogs, a standoff ensued until Little John arrived, threatening to shoot the dogs if they weren't called off. The friar, realizing he was outmatched, agreed to terms. "If you forsake Fountain's Dale and the Abbey," Robin said, "I'll pay you a noble every Sunday and provide new garments on every holy day." The friar, who had held Fountain's Dale for 7 years against all challengers, agreed and joined Robin Hood's band. Robin Hood and the friar leaving his men where they stood. Robin donned a chainmail tunic and a steel helm, took up his shield and sword, slung his bow over his shoulder, and filled his quiver with arrows. Fully armed, he set out for Fountain's Dale along the river. There, he spotted a friar walking by, also armed like Robin, though without a bow. As soon as he saw the friar, Robin dismounted his horse, tied it to a thorn bush, and called out to the friar to carry him across the water or face the consequence of death. The friar said nothing but hoisted Robin onto his broad back and marched into the river. No words were exchanged until they reached the opposite bank, where Robin lightly jumped off and was about to continue on his way when the friar stopped him. "Not so fast, my good man," the friar said. "Now it's my turn, and you will carry me across the river, or woe betide you." Robin complied, carrying the friar back to the starting side of the river. But when they reached the halfway point, the friar tilted his head, and Robin was suddenly plunged into the water. "Now you can sink or swim, as you wish," the friar said. With a laugh, Robin swam to a clump of golden broom and pulled himself out of the water. As the friar struggled to do the same, Robin knocked an arrow in his bow and shot it at the friar. But the friar quickly raised his shield, and the arrow fell harmlessly to the ground. "Fire away, my good man. Fire all day if you like," the friar called out. Robin kept shooting until his arrows were exhausted, but each time he missed the target. At last they drew their swords, and by 4 p.m, they were still locked in battle. Robin's strength was waning, and he could feel that he couldn't fight much longer. "Grace, grace," he shouted. "Let me blow my horn 3 times, and I will thank you on my knees." The friar told him to blow it as many times as he wished, and in an instant, the forest echoed with Robin's horn. Only minutes passed before 100 of Robin's men came running across the meadow. The friar was taken aback at the sight of them. Turning to Robin, he too begged for a grace. Robin granted it, and the friar whistled 3 times, followed by a mighty noise through the trees as 50 large dogs sprang toward them. "Here's a dog for each of your men," the friar said, "and I shall be your dog." But the dogs paid no heed to his words. 2 of them lunged at Robin and tore his green Lincoln cloak from his back. Robin's men were too busy fending off the dogs to notice their leader's plight, as each arrow fired at a dog was caught and held in its mouth. The outlaws were unaccustomed to fighting dogs and felt themselves being overwhelmed. Finally, Little John ordered the friar to call off his dogs. When he didn't act immediately, Little John fired several arrows, killing 6 dogs on the spot. "Wait, wait, my good companion," cried the friar. "Let's reach an agreement before any more harm is done." Once the deal was struck, it was agreed that the friar would renounce Fountain's Abbey and join Robin Hood's band, receiving a noble every Sunday throughout the year and new clothing on every holy day. This friar had guarded Fountain's Dale for 7 long years, and no knight, lord, or count could make him yield. But now he became one of Robin's most renowned men, known as Friar Tuck. How Robin Hood and Little John Quarreledon bright Pentecost morning, with the sun shining and birds singing, Robin Hood called Little John to go with him to Nottingham for Mass. As usual, they took their bows, and on the way, Little John proposed a target shooting contest, betting a penny. Robin, who considered himself the finest archer alive, laughed dismissively and told Little John he would give him 3 tries for every one of his own, which John readily accepted, but Robin soon regretted both his offer and his arrogance, for Little John swiftly won 5 shillings, leaving Robin furious. He struck Little John with his hand. Little John, not one to tolerate such treatment, told Robin plainly that he would never again recognize him as his master, and immediately returned to the forest. Robin, ashamed of what he had done, couldn't bring himself to admit his fault. His pride prevented him from confessing. He continued on his way to Nottingham and entered the church of St. Mary, feeling secretly uneasy, for the sheriff of the city was always his enemy. But he was there now, and there he intended to stay. He knelt before the great cross, visible to the people, but no one recognized him except one monk. The monk hurried out of the church, ran to the sheriff, and told him to come quickly and arrest his enemy. The sheriff wasted no time and, calling his men to follow, marched to the church. The noise of their entrance made Robin look around. Alas, he murmured to himself, "Now I miss Little John." But he drew his 2-handed sword and fought with such ferocity that 12 of the sheriff's men lay dead before him. Robin Hood and the Sheriff Robin found himself face to face with the sheriff and struck a fierce blow, but his sword shattered upon the sheriff's head, and he had already fired all his arrows. The sheriff's men quickly surrounded him and bound his arms. Bad news travels fast, and it wasn't long before the men of the forest heard that their leader was imprisoned. They wept, moaned, and wrung their hands, seemingly driven to madness, until Little John ordered them to gather themselves and help him deal with the monk. The next morning, Little John hid with a companion named Much, waiting until they saw the monk riding down the road, followed by a page carrying letters from the sheriff to the king, detailing Robin's capture. "Where are you from?" Little John asked, approaching the monk. "And can you tell us about a false outlaw named Robin Hood, who was made a prisoner yesterday? He stole 20 marks from me and my companion, and we'd be happy to hear of his ruin." "He stole from me too," said the monk, £100 and more. "But I caught him, and for that you can thank me." "I thank you so much that, with your permission, my friend, and I will keep you company," replied Little John. "For in this forest there are many wild men who recognize Robin Hood as their leader, and you ride this road in danger of your life." They traveled together, chatting, when suddenly Little John seized the horse's reins and yanked the monk by his hood. "He was my master," said Little John, "the one you've led to ruin. You'll never reach the king to tell him this story." At these words, the monk screamed loudly, but Little John ignored him, drawing his sword and swiftly cutting off his head, just as Much had done with the page to prevent him from carrying the news back to the sheriff. Afterward, they buried the bodies and, taking the letters, delivered them themselves to the king when they arrived at the palace In the presence of the king, Little John knelt and presented the letter. "God save you, my sovereign lord," he said. The king unrolled the letters and read them. "Never has there been a free man in merry England whom I so long to see," he remarked. "But where is the monk who was supposed to bring me these letters?" "He died on the way," Little John replied, and the king didn't ask further questions. 20 pounds each. The king ordered his treasurer, "Give Much and Little John, and make them free men of the crown." He then handed his own seal to Little John and commanded him to deliver it to the sheriff, telling him to bring Robin Hood before him. Unharmed, Little John did as the king ordered. When the sheriff saw the seal, he welcomed Little John and Much, offering them a feast. Little John soon convinced the sheriff to drink heavily. Before long, the sheriff fell asleep, and the two outlaws quietly made their way to the prison. Inside, John fought the gatekeeper with his sword for trying to block his entry, then took the keys and searched the cells until he found Robin. Handing him a sword, Little John whispered for Robin to follow him, and they crept until they reached the lowest part of the city wall, from where they jumped to safety and freedom. "Now, farewell," said Little John. "I've done you a good turn for a bad one." "Not so," replied Robin Hood. "I make you master of my men and of me, but Little John would have none of it. I only wish to be your companion, and so it shall be," he answered. The king was fooled. "By us both," he said, upon learning of the adventure. How the king visited Robin Hood. The king had no intention of letting Robin Hood have his way, and summoned his knights to follow him to Nottingham, where they would make plans on the best way to capture the outlaw. There they heard tragic tales of Robin's misdeeds and how, of the many herds of wild deer that once roamed the forest, only a few remained. This was the work of Robin Hood and his merry men, for whom the king swore vengeance with a mighty oath. "I wish I had this Robin Hood in my hands," he exclaimed. Then his actions would soon come to an end. So spoke the king, but an old knight, full of years and wisdom, responded and warned him that capturing Robin Hood would be no easy task, and that it would be better to leave it aside for the time being. The king, realizing the vanity in his impassioned words as soon as he had spoken them, listened to the elder and decided to wait for the right moment, should Robin ever fall into his power, for all this time and for 6 weeks after. While the king stayed in Nottingham, no news of Robin came, as he seemed to have vanished with his merry men into the land. Although the deer continued to disappear, one by one, finally, one day, a forester came to the king and told him that if he wished to see Robin, he should come with him, bringing 5 of his best knights. Eager, the king rose to follow, and the 6 men, dressed as monks, mounted their mules and rode toward the abbey, the king wearing a wide abbot's hat over his crown and singing as they passed through the green forest. Suddenly, around a bend in the road, Robin and his archers appeared before them. "With your permission, Sir Abbot," Robin said, grabbing the king's reins, "you'll be staying with us for a while. Know this, we are free men living off the king's deer, and we have no other food. Now you have abbeys and churches, and gold in abundance, so give us some of it in the name of holy charity." Robin Hood and the king "I have no more than 40 pounds with me," the king replied, "but I regret that it's not 100, for you would have received it all." Robin took the 40 pounds, gave half to his men, and then told the king that he could be on his way. "I thank you," said the king, "but I wish you to know that our sovereign lord has entrusted me with his seal and asked me to invite you to Nottingham." At this message, Robin knelt. "I love no man in the world more than I love my king," he exclaimed. "In response to your news, Abbot, which fills my heart with joy, you shall dine with me today. In the name of my king." He then led the king to an open place. Robin took a horn and blew it loudly, and at his call, 20 young men came quickly to carry out his will. "They are faster at obeying orders than my own men are at obeying mine," the king said to himself. Quickly, the men of the forest prepared the feast: venison, white bread, and good red wine. Robin and Little John served the king. "Rejoice," said Robin, "Abbot, for charity's sake. And then you shall see the kind of life we lead, so that you can tell our king." When they finished eating, the archers took up their bows and hung garlands of roses from a rope. Each man was to shoot through the garland. If he missed, he would receive a tap on the head from Robin. Being fine archers, few passed the test. Little John was scarlet and much missed the mark, and in the end, only Robin and Gilbert of the White Hand remained. Robin then took his final shot, and it landed just 3 fingers away from the garland. "Master," said Gilbert, "you've lost. Step forward and receive your punishment." "I'll accept it," replied Robin. "But good Abbot, I beg you to strike me." The king hesitated. It didn't seem right, he thought, to strike such a strong free man. But Robin insisted. So the king rolled up his sleeve and gave Robin such a hard slap on the head that he tumbled to the ground. "There's strength in your arm," said Robin. "Come, challenge me to a shot." And the king took a bow. As he did so, his hat fell back, and Robin saw his face. "My lord, the King of England, now I recognize you well," he exclaimed, and he fell to his knees, as did all the outlaws with him. "Mercy, I beg of you, my lord king, for my men and myself." "Mercy I grant," said the king. "And for that reason, I've come here to invite you and your men to leave the green forest and dwell at my court with me." "That shall be," replied Robin. "I and my men will go to your court and see how your service pleases us." Robin at the court. "Do you have any green cloth," the king asked, "that you could sell to me?" And Robin brought 30 yards or more and dressed the king and his men in green linen coats. "Now we'll all ride to Nottingham," Robin said. And they rode cheerfully, shooting along the way. The people of Nottingham saw them coming and trembled at the sight of the dark mass of Lincoln green approaching across the fields. "I fear our king will be killed," they whispered to each other. "And if Robin Hood enters the city, there will not be one of us whose life is safe. Every man, woman, and child prepared to flee." The king laughed heartily when he saw their fear and called them back. They were overjoyed to hear his voice and celebrated in great cheer. A few days later, the king returned to London, and Robin stayed at his court for 12 months. By this time, he had spent 100 pounds, as he gave generously to the knights and squires he met, gaining great renown for his liberality. But his men, who had been born under the shadow of the forest, could not live among streets and houses. One by one, they escaped, until only Little John and Little Scarlet remained. Then Robin himself began to long for home and seeing some young men. Practicing archery, he remembered the days when he was considered the finest archer in all of England. He immediately went to the king and asked for permission to go on a pilgrimage to Barnesdale. "I cannot deny you," the king replied. "You may be gone for 7 nights, but no more." And Robin thanked him, and that night he set off for the green forest. The return to the green forested was early morning, when Robin finally arrived, and thirsting, heard the songs of the birds, great and small. "It seems a long time since I've been here," he said to himself. "It would give me great joy to fell a deer once more." And he shot a great stag, blew his horn, and all the outlaws of the forest quickly gathered around him. "Welcome," they said, "our dear master, back to the tree of the green forest." They took off their hats and knelt before him, marveling at his return, the death of Robin Hood for 22 years. Robin Hood lived in Sherwood Forest after fleeing from court. Nothing the king could say would tempt him to return. At the end of that time, he fell ill. He neither ate nor drank and didn't care about the things he once loved. "I must go to Kirklees," he said, "to have some blood taken." But Will Scarlet, who overheard his words, spoke harshly to him. "Not with my permission, and not without 100 archers at your back, for there lives a wicked man there who will surely come into conflict with you, and you'll need all of us. If you are afraid, Will Scarlet, you may stay home for me," Robin said. "And indeed, I will take no man with me, except Little John, just to carry my bow. Carry your bow yourself, master, and I'll carry mine, and we'll shoot for a penny while we ride." "Very well, let it be so," said Robin. They continued on joyfully until they came upon some women crying bitterly by a stream. "What is the matter, good wives?" Robin Hood asked. "We weep for Robin Hood and his dear body, which must have his blood taken today," they replied. "Why do you weep for me?" Robin asked. "The prioress is my aunt's daughter, my cousin, and I know she would never harm me for anything in this world." And with that, he moved on, with Little John at his side. Soon they reached the priory, where they were warmly greeted by the prioress herself, who welcomed them kindly, especially after Robin handed her 20 gold pounds as payment for their stay, telling her that if it cost her more, she should inform him. She then began to bleed him for a long time. Robin said nothing, giving her credit for her kindness and skill in her craft. But eventually, so much blood was drawn that he began to suspect treachery. He tried to open the door, but she had left him alone in the room, and it was locked. With the blood still flowing, he couldn't escape through the barred window. So he lay there for hours, with no one coming near him. Finally, the bleeding stopped. Slowly, Robin rose and staggered to the lattice window. He blew his horn 3 times, but the sound was weak, so different from the powerful calls he was known for. Little John, who had been listening intently, felt that his master must be near death. With this thought, he stood up and hurried to the priory. He broke down the locks on all the doors between him and Robin, and soon entered the room where his master lay, pale and nearly drained of blood. "I beg you for a favor, dear master," cried Little John. "And what favor is that," said Robin Hood, "that Little John asks of me?" Little John replied, "It is to burn the beautiful hall of Kirkleys and the entire convent." But despite the wrong done to him, Robin Hood would not listen to Little John's cry for revenge. "I've never wronged a woman in my life," he said, "nor any man who was with one. But now I know my time has come. So give me my bow and a broad arrow, and wherever it falls, there shall my grave be dug. Place a clump of green grass under my head, and another at my feet, and place my bow beside me, for it always made the sweetest music to my ears. And make sure green and gravel mark my grave. And Little John, see to it that I have enough length and width to lie down." With that, he loosed his final arrow, and then he died. And where the arrow fell, Robin was buried. And so ends the incredible journey of Robin Hood, the hero of the forest, whose courage and kindness echoed through the ages. If stories of bravery and justice inspire you too, don't forget to share this tale with your friends and family. And if you'd like to hear more epic stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an adventure. Let's keep the legends alive together. Until next time, and may the stories always guide us.
Thank you.